As soon as you start writing code for Drupal 8, you're going to encounter files that end in a .yml extension. These are YAML files. YAML is a data serialization format, and I want to talk about why YAML and then look at the YAML syntax so that when you encounter these files and all the various places they're used in Drupal, you'll have a better understanding of what you're looking at. In this tutorial, we'll look at why YAML is good for data serialization, the YAML syntax, and then do some experimenting with YAML in the context of Drupal to see how YAML data structures are represented in PHP. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to read and write a YAML file and understand how the information it contains will be represented as PHP data structures. So YAML is an acronym, and the acronym stands for YAML Ain't Markup Language. It's a recursive acronym, kind of like PHP. Though the acronym is often confused with yet another markup language, which is incorrect. A markup language is something like XML or HTML, which is a way of giving additional information to strings of text. YAML, on the other hand, is a data serialization format. It's intended to take complex data structures and represent them in a human-readable way that's also easy for computer programming languages to parse into their native data structures. In this presentation, I want to talk about some of the strengths of YAML as a data serialization format. Then we'll take a look at the syntax of a YAML document and how you can represent your variable data inside of a YAML file. And we'll talk about different YAML data types and collections. So, why YAML? First off, it's easy to read. There's no opening or closing tags that you have to worry about. You just start up a text file and you can start typing your YAML right into the file. It is, after all, intended to be a human-readable data serialization format. It's similar to JSON. In fact, YAML is a superset of JSON. So you can use JSON-like syntax within YAML, but you can also use a little bit more friendly syntax, and it doesn't require things like the opening and closing curly braces that JSON does. YAML is supported by almost every programming languages. Some languages have native support for YAML, so it's built into the language itself. Others, like PHP, don't have built-in support, but there are other libraries that you can include that have YAML parsers. YAML is smart about scalar data types. So what does that mean? It means that when you're writing a YAML value, so you've got your key value pair represented in YAML, you can write a string and not have to worry about putting quotation marks around it. So I can, if I want to, put the string hello world in quotation marks, or I can leave them out, and YAML will figure out that that's a string. It does the same for things like Boolean values. I can write true, and it'll represent it as the Boolean value true and not the string true. Or the number 1 will be represented as an integer. This makes it even more human-friendly to read YAML files. One of my favorite things about YAML files, you can leave comments right in your YAML file. There's not a ton of this throughout Drupal, but it is a pretty neat feature. So, unlike some other data serialization formats where you can't leave comments, this makes it even more human readable because I can tell you more information about the data that's in the file. And finally, one of the main reasons that Drupal is using YAML is that the Symfony framework, which Drupal is incorporating components of as of Drupal version 8, is already making use of YAML. So it made sense for the Drupal project to continue to use the standard from the Symfony project, which it's incorporating pieces of. This is a really simple example of a value represented in a YAML file. In YAML, you'll notice that there is one value per line in the file. And every value is made up of a key and a value pair. Think of it like an associative array in PHP. The key being the variable name of the thing that you're representing, and then the value being the string or the integer or whatever data it is that's in that variable. In this example, you can see there's the key, name, and then colon, which acts as a separator, and then the value. So all YAML values are represented like this. You've got the key, you've got a colon as the separator, and then you've got the value. Here's an example of a YAML file. This one's actually taken straight out of Drupal's system module, so you can get an idea of what something like this might look like. In YAML, new lines are important and have syntactically significant meaning, kind of like in Python. So do tab characters. YAML does not allow for literal tab characters at all. Space is only, but indentation is important because we use it to represent lists or compound data types. You'll note that there is, in this example, one key value pair per line. So the first couple of key value pairs are UUID being the key, and it has a value of just an empty string, name being the key on the second line, and then Drupalize.Me being the value. Because YAML's smart about scalar data types, it'll know that Drupalize.me is actually a string, even though I haven't put it in quotation marks. A little bit further down, you see the value page : and then under that there's 3 lines, each of which are indented 2 spaces. This is what YAML refers to as a compound data type. It's kind of like creating a list or an array in other programming languages. You're saying all of the things under this, indented by 2 spaces, are children of the page key. YAML has support for a bunch of different scalar data types. There's the basics like string, so you could type a string with or without the quotation marks. You can have an integer. You can also have float values like pi or any decimal place value. YAML or the YAML parser will automatically interpret those as the appropriate scalar type within the programming language that you're using. So that would be represented as a PHP float. True, false, both interpreted as Boolean values. Null will turn into a null value. And then date time values will actually turn into Unix timestamps in PHP. So 2014 0403 will turn into the Unix timestamp representing that date. YAML also has support for compound data types or collections. You'll hear them referred to those kind of interchangeably. Some people call it compound data, some call it collections. Really what we're talking about is lists of things grouped together under a single parent key. These lists are also infinitely nestable, kind of like an associative array in PHP where you can have it go any level deep. The example on the left here is a list in YAML, and what you'll end up with in PHP is an array that is just numerically indexed, so no keys in the index. Notice how in YAML you've got key : and then below that 2 spaces and then a hyphen in the value. Hyphen indicates this is a new element in the list, and then the value. Of course, the 2 there will be represented as an integer, and the other 2 will be strings. On the right-hand side, you've got an associative array. Same thing. You've got the initial key : and then underneath it, nested with 2 spaces, you've got a key value pair. Name being the key, Joe being the string value here. Places that you'll encounter YAML in Drupal. Really, you're going to encounter YAML a lot where Drupal needs to get lists of things that don't require code execution. In a lot of cases, these are things that used to be info hooks in Drupal 7. So you have that paradigm of an info hook which returns an array of data. A lot of that in Drupal 8 has been replaced by YAML files. Other places that you'll encounter it are info files for themes and modules and so forth. Instead of using Drupal's sort of custom variation of the PHP INI syntax, we're now using YAML. So those are all mytheme.info.yaml or mymodule.info.yaml files. One of the killer features in Drupal 8 is the configuration management system. And all of the data, all the configuration data that it's storing when it's written to disk is stored in YAML format. So you'll see YAML files used in that system quite a bit. It's also in various other places too. The new routing system, service declarations, permissions, all of these things are defined in YAML files. If you're curious about how Drupal handles the parsing of these YAML files and turning them into PHP, take a look at the class Drupal Component Serialization YAML. This is the class that is ultimately responsible for reading in those files and parsing them into the PHP data structure that you make use of. If you want more information about the YAML language and the syntax and language support and so forth, take a look at the website www.yaml.org. It doesn't look like much, but it does provide a lot of information about the language. If you want to play around with YAML in the context of Drupal, which we're going to do right now, I've created a handy little module to demonstrate what a YAML file will look like when parsed into Drupal, or into PHP rather. You can get this module at drupal.org/project/YAML_sandbox. It's a Drupal 8 module, super simple. Download it and install it via the normal means. And when you do so, what you'll end up with is this. on a Drupal 8 site with the YAML sandbox module enabled, you've got a simple text area into which you can type YAML or copy and paste YAML from a file in Drupal and then hit the submit button, and it'll show you the PHP representation of that data. For example, I could type hello and then I could say hello world. So I've got my key, hello, my separator, colon, and then the string hello world, and then I'll maybe have it one named number, and we'll say 42. When I submit this, all the module's doing is using the Drupal YAML parser to turn this into a PHP data structure, and then using variable dump, var dump, to print it to the page. I've also got the xdebug PHP extension installed, so you do get a little bit prettier output with that. But this is really great because you can see, okay, when this YAML in the text field here was read by PHP, this is the data structure that it got interpreted to. An array, so all of the contents of that file were turned into a single array. And you can see the hello key here maps to the hello key in this associative array. And that hello world, it's turned into a string value of hello world. 42 was turned into an integer value. You could also try some things that are a little more complex. Let's try, just to demonstrate some of the other scalar types and things that you can do. So I've just copy and pasted some text in here. Let me expand this so you can see the whole thing. So I've got an example of a float type, scientific notation. I didn't mention this in the presentation, but YAML can also represent numbers in scientific notation. We've got a Boolean, a null value, a date, a normal array or a YAML list, and associative array. Let's click submit on that one. You can see how when this was parsed into PHP, what that PHP data structure looks like. Our float value turned into a float. Our Boolean is the Boolean value true. Our date was turned into a Unix timestamp. And we've got a numerically indexed array from our list and an associative array from our associative array in YAML. That covers all of the basics of YAML. There's a few more complicated things that you can do with the YAML language, like anchors or aliases for other values within a YAML file, or joining sequences of things together. YAML is a superset of the JSON language, so you can also put any JSON into this and it should work. This is what you'll need to know about YAML though, in order to interact with the YAML system in various places that you'll see it in the context of Drupal 8.